The morning sun rose over the small town, and the air felt calm as people moved through their daily routines. In a quiet house near the end of a narrow street, a young boy named Omar sat at the kitchen table with his lunchbox open in front of him. His father Amir stood beside him packing food with gentle hands. The lunch was simple but made with care. Amir worked long hours and money was always tight, yet he never let his son leave home without something to eat. Omar looked at him with tired eyes, and Amir sensed something was wrong. He asked if everything was fine at school. Omar nodded, but his voice lacked strength. He said everything was okay, but he avoided eye contact. Amir wanted to push for more, yet he also knew his son spoke slowly about things that made him uncomfortable, so he waited for the right moment. Omar walked to school with slow steps. His mind was heavy with worry because the same thing had been happening for weeks. His teacher, Mr. Lewis, always took his lunch. It started with simple remarks about snacks, and then he began removing items from the lunchbox and saying he needed them. Omar felt confused at first, but when he tried to question it, the teacher gave him a cold look. Omar feared that look because it made him feel small and helpless. He started staying quiet and letting it happen. Each day his stomach ached from hunger, and each day he returned home pretending that he had eaten well. He did this because he did not want to upset his father, who worked so hard already. Inside the classroom, Mr. Lewis carried an air of importance. He liked to seem strict and made sure the students knew he held power. Most students stayed silent around him and avoided any conflict. With Omar, he saw a child who never argued and stayed soft-spoken. It made it easy for him to take advantage. During breaks, he would walk to Omar's desk and say he needed to check his bag or inspect his food. Then he would take what he wanted and walk away as if nothing unusual had happened. Omar sat quietly each time and waited for the break to end. Hunger became a normal part of his school day. One afternoon, the hunger felt stronger than usual. His stomach made noise and a few classmates laughed. Omar lowered his head and tried to hide the embarrassment. When he reached home that day, Amir noticed how quickly he sat near the water jug. He drank so fast that the water spilled down his chin. Amir watched quietly. A thought formed in his mind that this was not normal. He wondered if Omar was eating enough at school. That night he sat beside his son and asked again if everything was okay. Omar hesitated and said school was fine. Amir smiled gently and said he trusted him, but he also wanted to help if something was bothering him. Omar remained silent, but his fingers played nervously with the edge of the blanket. Amir saw this small gesture, and it confirmed his fear that something was being hidden. The next morning, Amir woke up earlier than usual. He prepared breakfast and waited for Omar. When his son came to the table, he seemed uneasy. Amir packed his lunch slowly while observing him. He then placed a hand on Omar's shoulder and asked him once more about school. Omar tried to speak, but the words got stuck in his throat. Amir did not push yet. He said one line that changed everything. He said a father always knows when his child is struggling. Omar froze for a moment. His eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for many days. Amir pulled him close and asked softly what was happening. Omar finally broke his silence. He told him that his teacher took his lunch every day and that he stayed hungry. He spoke in a small voice filled with shame, but Amir held him firmly and told him he had done nothing wrong. Hearing the truth made Amir's heart tighten with pain and anger, but he stayed calm for his son. He asked why Omar had not told him earlier. Omar said he did not want to trouble him because he already worked so much. Amir felt both proud and sad at this answer. He explained that a father works not only to provide food, but also to protect and support his child. He told Omar that he never wanted him to hide pain just to make life easier. Omar nodded and wiped his eyes. That night Amir could not sleep. He thought about the teacher who took advantage of a child with such little strength to defend himself. He thought about the hunger Omar endured in silence. A decision formed in his mind. He would not confront the teacher in anger because he knew that might bring more fear into Omar's life. Instead, he would send a message that could not be misunderstood. A message that would show the teacher that he could not continue this behavior. He opened a small drawer near his bed and took out an item wrapped in cloth. Inside was a small recording device he had used years ago for work. He tested it carefully and checked its sound. Then he placed it aside and thought about the next step. Early the next morning the sky was still dim when Amir woke up. He packed Omar's lunch with great care. He placed fruits and sandwiches inside just like every day, but this time he added something else. He tucked the small recording device beneath the food so it lay hidden at the bottom of the bag. He turned it on before closing the lunchbox. Omar watched curiously and asked what it was. Amir smiled gently and said he was putting something to keep him safe. He told him not to worry and to carry his bag normally. Omar nodded, though he still felt nervous. His father then told him to stay calm at school and act the same as every other day. Omar walked to school feeling strange but hopeful. He trusted his father, even if he did not fully understand the plan. When he entered the classroom he sat quietly as always. The morning lessons passed slowly. Then the break bell rang and the familiar fear returned. He saw Mr. Lewis walking toward him with the same confident stride. The teacher smiled in a way that made Omar uneasy. He reached for the lunchbox and made a comment about checking it. Omar stayed silent and watched as the teacher opened the box. He felt his heart beating faster. He wondered what would happen next. What he did not know was that his father's plan had already begun. The moment Mr. Lewis opened the lunchbox, Omar felt his breath catch in his throat. He watched the teacher remove the sandwich as if it belonged to him. The same pattern repeated like every day, yet something felt different because Omar knew his father had placed something inside the bag. The teacher lifted the fruit next and placed it on his own desk. He did this so casually that anyone watching would think nothing strange was happening. Omar lowered his gaze and held the edge of his desk with both hands. He wanted to stay brave because his father told him to stay calm. Inside the bag the small device recorded every sound. It recorded the teacher taking the food and the tone he used when he spoke to Omar. The classroom around them buzzed with the voices of other students, and none of them noticed what was happening in the corner where Omar sat. When the break ended the hunger started again, and Omar quietly drank water to ease the feeling. He wished the day would end soon. After school he walked home with slow steps. Amir opened the door when he saw him and gave him a warm look. Omar entered the house and sat down right away. Amir noticed his drained expression. He asked if the teacher took his lunch again. Omar nodded gently. Amir placed a hand on his shoulder and told him he was proud of him for staying strong. Then Amir opened the lunchbox and removed the device. He set it on the table and listened to it carefully. As the audio played, the room stayed silent. Omar watched his father's face to see any sign of anger, but instead he saw calm focus. Amir listened to every word spoken by the teacher. The proof was there, and he now knew exactly how to take the next step. That night after dinner, Amir sat at the table and thought about the right way to handle this situation. He did not want to raise his voice or accuse without evidence because that often caused trouble for children at school. He wanted a solution that protected Omar and taught the teacher that his actions were wrong. He finally decided to visit the school the next morning. He planned to request a meeting with the principal so the matter could be addressed properly. Omar listened quietly as his father spoke. He felt nervous but also relieved because he knew he was no longer alone in this struggle. Amir assured him that he would be safe and that telling the truth was the strongest thing he could do. The following morning the sky was bright and clear, but Omar felt a knot in his stomach. He walked beside his father toward the school gate. The moment they reached the entrance, Amir told him to go to his class while he headed to the office. Omar entered the building and followed the hallway. Students greeted each other and filled the rooms with chatter. Omar walked slowly because he knew something important was happening today. In the office, Amir introduced himself to the staff and requested a meeting with the principal. They guided him to a small waiting area. He sat there with the device held in his hand. His expression was calm, but he carried a firm determination in his eyes. The principal came out shortly and invited him into her office. She greeted him politely and asked how she could help. Amir explained that he wanted to discuss something concerning a teacher and his son. The principal listened with attentive eyes. Amir then placed the device on the desk and pressed play. The voice of Mr. Lewis filled the room. The principal leaned forward as the recording made everything clear. She heard the teacher take the food and claim he needed to check it. She heard Omar's soft voice trying to respond. When the recording ended, the room fell quiet. Amir waited for her reaction. The principal took a deep breath and looked concerned. She thanked Amir for bringing this to her attention and assured him that this behavior was not acceptable. She said she would handle it immediately. Amir nodded and said he did not want the teacher to harm or trouble Omar in any way. The principal promised that his son's safety was the first priority. She asked if she could keep the recording for documentation. Amir agreed and left the office feeling a weight lift from his chest. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Omar sat quietly at his desk. His classmates worked on a morning assignment. Omar felt anxious because he knew something important was happening in the office. He kept glancing at the door, hoping his father was safe and the problem was being handled. After a while, the classroom door opened. The principal entered with a serious expression. The students straightened in their seats. Mr. Lewis looked surprised to see her. She asked him to step outside for a moment. The teacher hesitated but followed her into the hallway. Omar watched the door through the glass window. He could not hear the conversation, but he saw the teacher's expression change as he listened. At first he looked confused, then a bit concerned, and finally uneasy. The principal pointed toward the classroom, then toward the office as if giving instructions. The teacher nodded slowly with a stiff posture. When he returned to the classroom, he avoided looking at Omar. His steps were shorter, and his face had lost its usual confident expression. The principal addressed the class and reminded them that teachers were there to guide and support students. She said kindness and fairness were important in every learning space. She glanced at Omar for a brief moment, then left the room. The teacher resumed the lesson, but his voice lacked its usual authority. The students noticed the shift in tone, though they did not understand what had happened. During the lunch break, something surprising occurred. For the first time in many weeks, Mr. Lewis did not walk toward Omar's desk. Instead, he stayed near the front of the room and pretended to organize papers. Omar slowly opened his lunchbox and waited. His heart beat fast because he was afraid the teacher might still approach him. But minutes passed and nothing happened. He finally lifted the sandwich to his mouth and took a bite. The taste felt different today. It felt warm, comforting, and safe because it was the first time he had eaten his food at school without fear. When Omar returned home that day, he told his father what happened. Amir felt relieved, but he also knew the situation was not fully over. He wanted to ensure the teacher understood his mistake completely. He told Omar that they would give it a little time and watch what happened next. Omar nodded and felt grateful for the support he now had. However, the next day at school, something unexpected took place. It was something that made it clear that the teacher had not learned his lesson as well as everyone hoped. The next morning began with a calm sky, yet a strange tension followed Omar as he walked into the school building. He hoped the issue had ended and that the teacher would stop troubling him. But deep inside, he feared something still lingered. When he reached his classroom, he noticed that the atmosphere felt slightly different. His classmates whispered among themselves as if they sensed a change in the teacher's mood. When Mr. Lewis entered the room, his face held a forced smile. It looked tight and unnatural, as if he was trying to hide something beneath it. Omar sat still and waited for the lessons to begin. He kept his lunchbox close to him and hoped nothing unusual would happen. During the first lesson, the teacher used a softer tone than usual, yet he still avoided looking at Omar directly. He acted as though nothing had happened the previous day, but there was a stiffness in his movements. When the break approached, Omar felt his heartbeat grow faster. He remembered how peaceful the lunch break had been yesterday, and he prayed it would be the same today. When the bell rang, he opened his lunch slowly. The teacher glanced in his direction, but stayed at the front of the class. Omar felt a small wave of relief as he took out his sandwich. But then something unexpected happened. The teacher called out his name and asked him to come forward with his lunchbox. The class fell silent. Omar froze in his seat and stared at the teacher with wide eyes. He could not understand why he was being called. The break was supposed to be a time to eat peacefully. Omar stood up with shaky hands. He walked slowly toward the teacher's desk, holding the lunchbox close to his chest. The teacher gave a smile that lacked warmth. He asked Omar to place the lunchbox on his desk so he could inspect it. The class watched with confusion because no one else had their lunch checked. Omar placed the box on the desk. He felt helpless again. The teacher opened it and looked at the food inside. He then made a remark about school rules and said he needed to make sure all food items were appropriate. This sounded like another excuse, yet he used a calm tone to hide his intent. He removed one item and placed it aside, telling Omar he would return it later. Omar felt a familiar sting of hunger and fear rising inside him. When the break ended, Omar returned to his seat. He felt the same emptiness he used to feel each day. His classmates whispered as they saw the teacher take something from him again. Some felt uneasy, but no one knew how to speak up. Omar's eyes lowered to the floor. He thought his father's efforts had been in vain. Yet he also remembered the promise his father made that he would not let this continue. After school, Omar walked home slowly. When Amir opened the door, he saw the sadness on his son's face even before he spoke. He sat him down and asked gently if the teacher had taken anything again. Omar nodded quietly and told him what happened. Amir felt a heavy ache in his heart. He had hoped the recording and the meeting would stop the behavior, but it seemed the teacher had found a new way to exert control. Amir placed his hand on Omar's shoulder and told him he was doing the right thing by sharing everything. He said they needed to take a stronger step now. That night, Amir thought deeply. He knew the principal had handled the matter yesterday, yet the teacher still dared to find a loophole. This meant the problem ran deeper. He could not allow his son to return to school the next day without a firm solution. After many hours of thought, he made a decision. Tomorrow he would stay near the school during lunch break. Not inside the building because he wanted to avoid causing fear for the children, but close enough to step in if anything happened. He wanted to protect his son directly. The next morning, Amir walked with Omar to school, but instead of leaving immediately, he told him he would stay in the area. Omar felt relieved though still anxious. He entered the school while Amir stood outside near the boundary wall where he could see the windows of the classroom. The day went on quietly for the first few hours. Omar did his work and tried to avoid thinking about the break. When the bell finally rang for lunch, the familiar tension rose again. Omar held his lunchbox tightly and waited. The teacher rose from his chair and began walking toward him. This time, however, something was different. He had a stern expression, as if he was determined to regain his sense of power. He asked Omar to bring his lunch to the desk again. Omar hesitated. He remembered his father waiting outside and felt a small spark of courage. The teacher repeated the instruction. Omar slowly stood up with the lunchbox in his hand. He took a deep breath and said in a soft voice that he wanted to eat his lunch at his desk like everyone else. The entire classroom went silent. The teacher's face tightened as if he had not expected this tiny act of bravery. He stepped closer and told Omar to follow his instructions. Omar felt fear rise again, but he also remembered his father's words about standing for truth. He repeated his request to eat at his seat. At that exact moment, Amir moved closer to the window outside. He could sense something happening inside. The teacher reached out to take the lunchbox from Omar. As he grabbed the box, he also raised his voice slightly. Amir heard the tone even through the glass. He pushed open the door leading to the hallway and walked straight toward the classroom. The students looked up when he entered. The teacher turned around startled. Amir walked to his son and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. His expression was calm yet firm. He looked at the teacher and asked him why he was taking Omar's lunch again after the meeting with the principal. The teacher stuttered and tried to give the same excuse about checking food. Amir did not raise his voice, yet his presence alone shifted the mood in the room. He asked the teacher to explain why only Omar's lunch was being checked. The teacher could not answer clearly. His words tangled as he tried to defend himself. The students watched in silence. Amir then asked Omar if he was comfortable explaining what had happened. Omar spoke softly but honestly. He said the teacher took his food almost every day. The class listened with wide eyes. Some students nodded as if they had seen parts of it before. Amir looked at the teacher again and said this could not continue. He told him that he would meet the principal once more, and this time he expected a proper permanent solution. The teacher stood frozen. His pride had been challenged by a gentle father who refused to let injustice continue. Amir took Omar's hand and guided him out of the classroom. He told his son he was proud of him for speaking up. Omar felt a warmth in his chest because for the first time he no longer felt small or afraid. He had spoken the truth, and his father had stood beside him. But neither of them knew that the next meeting with the principal would bring a bigger revelation. Something about the teacher's past was about to come forward. Amir walked beside Omar toward the principal's office with a calm but firm determination in his steps. Omar held his father's hand tightly. He still felt shaken, yet he also felt safe because his father had stepped into the classroom and protected him without anger or harsh words. When they reached the office, the staff guided them inside. The principal looked up with concern as soon as she saw Amir and noticed Omar's uneasy posture. She asked them to take a seat and listened carefully as Amir explained what had happened during the lunch break. Her expression changed from surprise to disappointment. She said she believed the matter had been resolved, but it was clear the teacher continued to behave unfairly. Amir nodded and told her that he wanted a final solution that ensured Omar would never face this problem again. The principal agreed and said she would look deeper into the situation. She called for Mr. Lewis to come to the office. He entered a few minutes later with a stiff posture and nervous eyes. He looked at Amir and Omar but avoided meeting their gaze. The principal asked him to sit. She then spoke in a calm but serious tone. She told him that the behavior he showed toward a student was unacceptable and went against school rules. She reminded him that the school existed to support children, not to take advantage of them. For a moment, the teacher tried to defend himself by saying he checked the food for safety. But the principal asked him why he inspected only one child's lunch and not others. He did not have a clear answer. His voice trembled as he tried to respond, but nothing he said made sense. The principal then opened a file that had been placed on her desk earlier. She had already begun reviewing his record after the previous meeting with Amir. She revealed that complaints had been made against him in the past from other parents, but none of them had enough proof to take firm action. When she listened to the recording from Omar's lunchbox, she realized the pattern matched those past reports. Amir felt a sense of sadness mixed with anger. He could not understand how someone who worked with children could behave in such a way. Omar sat quietly beside him holding his father's arm. He listened to every word, but he did not feel fear anymore. He felt stronger because the truth was coming out. The principal looked at Mr. Lewis and said she had no choice but to remove him from classroom duty immediately. She told him he would be suspended while the school board reviewed his case. The teacher's shoulders dropped. He tried to speak again, but the principal raised her hand and said the decision was final. She also apologized to Amir and Omar for the trouble they had faced. She promised that the school would make sure Omar felt safe and respected from this moment on. Amir thanked her and stood up with his son. He felt relief wash over him as they left the office. As they walked through the hallway, Omar looked around with a lighter heart. The fear he used to feel now faded away. Some of his classmates who had heard part of what happened whispered among themselves, but this time their whispers held no judgment. They looked at Omar with sympathy and respect because he had faced something hard and come out stronger. Amir placed his hand gently on his son's back and guided him out of the building. Once they reached home, Omar finally relaxed. He told his father he felt free for the first time in many days. Amir smiled warmly and said he was proud of him every single moment. Later that evening, the news of the incident spread among the school staff and parents. Many parents felt grateful that someone had finally spoken up with real proof. Some even called the principal to thank her for taking the matter seriously. Omar sat at the table drawing with his pencils while Amir watched him with pride. He knew this experience had been painful, but it had also taught his son something important about courage and truth. Omar looked up and said he never wanted to hide anything from his father again. Amir hugged him and said a child should always feel free to speak. The next morning, Omar walked to school with a different energy. The air felt bright and welcoming instead of heavy. When he entered the building, some teachers greeted him kindly. His classmates waved at him and invited him to sit with them before class started. Omar felt a warm sense of belonging. When the new substitute teacher arrived, she smiled kindly and introduced herself. She treated every child with equal respect. Throughout the day, Omar felt comfortable for the first time in a long time. During the lunch break, he opened his lunchbox without fear. He ate his food peacefully. The substitute teacher even walked around the room to check if students needed help with anything, not to take anything away, but to offer support. When school ended, Omar ran toward the gate with excitement. Amir stood there waiting for him. Omar hugged his father tightly and told him the day went well. Amir felt a deep sense of relief knowing his son finally felt safe in a place meant for learning and growth. They walked home together talking about small things like Omar's drawing competition and a new game his friend taught him. Life felt lighter and brighter for both of them. Days passed and Omar grew more confident in school. His classmates began including him in games and group work. The substitute teacher continued to encourage him. His grades improved because he could focus on learning instead of worrying about his lunch. Amir noticed the change and felt grateful that the dark cloud that hung over his son's school life was gone. He believed strongly that children deserved protection and honesty, and he was glad he had taken a stand at the right time. One afternoon, the principal called Amir for an update. She informed him that the school board had finished reviewing the case. They found enough evidence to confirm the complaints and decided that Mr. Lewis would not return to the classroom. Amir thanked her sincerely. This meant no other child would face the same trouble. He shared the news with Omar, who felt a strong sense of relief. He smiled and said he felt safe now. Amir hugged him and told him he was brave for speaking the truth even when it was difficult. The story of what happened became a quiet reminder in the school that respect and fairness were important. Teachers became more aware and students felt more comfortable speaking up. Omar continued to grow and learn in a peaceful environment. He never forgot the days he faced hunger and fear, but he also never forgot the strength he found in himself and the protection he received from his father. Years later, when Omar looked back at that time, he remembered the moment he first spoke the truth and the way his father stood beside him without hesitation. It became a lesson that stayed with him through life. He learned that courage does not always require loud words. Sometimes it grows from quiet hearts that refuse to accept unfairness. And he learned that a parent's love can change even the hardest days into brighter ones. In the end, Omar became stronger because he faced his fear with honesty. His father guided him with patience and respect. Together they turned a painful experience into a story of courage and hope. And the school became a safer place because one small child and one determined father chose to do what was right.